Today's video is sponsored by beer. I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, it's not paying me, but... What's up? Welcome to Pros with Peter. I'm Peter. Today, we're going to be brewing a cold IPA. Cold IPA is kind of on trend right now. It's a newer thing, and people are calling it an IPA because, I think, for marketing. Cold IPA doesn't make any sense. This is a lager beer. This is a beer brewed with lager yeast at lager temperatures. It is something you might call an IPL, but also might just call a hoppy lager. The cold IPA is brewed with a high portion of rice, like a American light lager or Japanese dry lager. That really helps bring a lightness and a crispness to the beer that otherwise wouldn't be there. It is still not an ale. It is a lager. I could see, no, I can't see. The name bugs me. The name bothers me. Cold IPA, I think it's dumb, but I think it sounds delicious, and I want to brew one, and I want to try one. So we're going to brew one up today, and we're going to bring about 8.5 or 9 gallons of water up to a lower strike temperature than normal, so maybe 156, to try and mash in about 149, so we get a lot of really, really fermentable sugars out of our mash. So let's get started. So as that was coming up to our strike temperature, I added my water additions, which were 10 grams of gypsum and 3 grams of calcium chloride. I want a very dry and more bitter focused beer for this one. That's why we're adding the rice, that's why we're adding a good amount of hop, and that's why I'm treating my water with more gypsum and less calcium chloride. Since we're at the temperature that I want to be at, I'm going to add my bag, and then we're going to bring in our grain. Wow, that works really well. Wow. That does make it more challenging. Because I'm torrified of crystal malt. That was a torrified rice joke. I'm proud of that one. So since cold IPA is kind of a new thing, I don't know how big of a thing it's going to be. I first heard about it in a beer by Kevin Davey, brewmaster at Wayfinder Brewing in Portland, Oregon, who collaborated with Ecliptic, I think it was, and they made a cold IPA, and that's where I first heard about it. I haven't gotten to try that, but the first one I did try was at Green Cheek. It was very good, but it's supposed to be a very hoppy, crisp, dry IPA. So the way they do that is they make it not an IPA, but a lager. In addition to it being a lager, it's got about 25-30% of corn or rice to really lighten up the body like a light lager would. So my recipe is 25% flaked rice and about 75% American Pilsner to keep it nice and light and crisp. And there's a tiny bit of acidulated malt and a tiny bit of carapils in there just for body and mash pH. I'll share my whole recipe down below, but that's basically it. Then we're gonna do a good bit of bittering and flavor hop to get to about 60 IBUs. Maybe I'll even push that up to about 70. But it's definitely a crisp, bitter beer, and it should be at about 7.4%. So it's not holding back from maybe, you know, a traditional IPL might be more like 6%. But I don't know if you could really call it a new style or an IPA, but I think it sounds really good. All right. 30-minute mash is done. I'm gonna pop off this cover, see what temperature we ended at, pull the grains out, bring it up to a boil. The prestige. The prestige. Woo! I don't know why I pulled that off and didn't think it might be hot. All right, let's get these grains out of here. Wow, that's heavy. That's really holding on to liquid. My God. We need to set up a pulley. Now that our grains are out, we've got our wort that is ready to be boiled. So we'll bring it up to a boil and check back in when that happens. In this beer, I'm going for a nice bitter, resinous, fruity, new age kind of character. So I'm using 3 different hops all throughout the boil, and they are Strata, Cascade, and Nelson Sauvin. So I'm using them at different times in order to get about 65 IBUs and combining early, middle, and late hopping in order to get a variety of flavors. And then I will dry hop it with all three of these once that time comes. To see more details and know exactly what's going in and what amounts when, click the recipe in the link below. It's a little bit complicated to just show you every single hop. So it's not terribly complex, but it's just, if you really want the details, check out the link below. We just hit our 60 minutes. I just turned off the heat. I'm gonna start the cooler and we'll cool it down to about 70 degrees. Make sure these aren't leaking. I'll stir as I cool. So we're at about 78 degrees. I know that our groundwater is gonna take too long to get, I mean, it won't even get to 50 degrees for a lager, so that's useless. So I'm gonna take out the immersion chiller, move it into our fermenter, and just wait a couple hours until I pitch my yeast. We're not gonna get there with the chiller, but it got us most of the way. So I've got my sanitized fermenter, my wort, and my sanitized transfer line. Just gonna move it all over from the kettle to the fermenter. There we go, we're moving. Okay, we're going to let that decrease in temperature and then pitch our yeast in a couple hours. All right, it is the next morning after our brew day yesterday, and we are ready to pitch our yeast. I don't normally love waiting this long to pitch our yeast, but it got a little bit late yesterday, and we figured we could pitch in the morning. So here we are with original gravity being 1067. I don't know where I came up with 1056. Original gravity being 1067. It's a little high and it's a lager, and I don't have a starter, so I'm going to pitch 2 packets of yeast into this one. I'm using Saf Lager 3470, and I'm just gonna pitch it right in there and let it rehydrate on top of that and let it do its thing. All right, before I add my yeast, I'm gonna shake this up again to reoxygenate the wort since it's been sitting overnight. Make sure extra sanitize. So we've got our yeast pitched, and I've got my fridge set at 49 degrees. So hopefully we'll leave this fermenting around 52 for a couple weeks, and then we'll raise the temp to about 60 over the course of a couple days, 68 maybe, for a diacetyl rest, and then we'll dry hop it and crash it and see how it turns out. Here we are, 1 month after brew day, which is admittedly a pretty quick turnaround for lagers, but I let fermentation go for a little while and then used biofine in this one, so I lagered it a little less, but I did let it sit cold and I let it come to up to carb at a slower pace than I normally do. I did maybe 20 psi and I shook it just to get the biofine really mixed in, and then left it at about 14 psi for a week, and it wasn't quite where I wanted it, so I bumped it up to 20 psi for like 12 hours. And then I bumped it down to serving pressure, which is like 11, and it was nice. So here we are. I poured out the first, I was planning on pouring out a pint, but it wasn't even a full pint that came out until the chunkiness stopped and the beer started pouring pretty darn clear. So with this one, I've only poured a few off and I've gotten a couple little bits of hop, but the beer is pretty clear. At least it was the last time I poured it. So we will see what it looks like right now. We'll check on the carbonation and see how it smells, see how it tastes, and see how we like Cold IPA, which I think I already ranted about how that's a dumb name, because IPA is India Pale Ale, and we use lager yeast. So it's like an IPL, but that's also kind of a dumb name. Anyway, moving on. Let's see how this beer turned out. I think the idea is awesome, because I'm a fan of hoppy lagers, especially ones that are a little bit more malty to balance a little bit more bitterness. So, we'll see. I'm going to pour myself some beer out of the tap. This beer glass could be cleaner, but don't judge me too hard. Whoo! Dang. Alright. Not quite the incredible bright clarity of the light lager that I brewed, the American light lager, but still pretty darn good for as hoppy as this beer is. And who knows, maybe another week at serving pressure and this will be as bright as possible. Man, that American light lager is really bright. Wow. If you don't know what the term bright means when I'm saying that about beer, click the link above. I don't know, well, who knows what order these videos are coming out in, but if that video's out, there's going to be the link above, and you can see how really delightful and bright that beer turned out. This one, also very good. Nice and clear, not hazy, not the brightest beer I've ever had, but it looks really nice. I'm very happy with how it came out. And it's got a bit more color. It's, goodness, 25 to 30% rice. I've got the weights here, but I'm not going to do the math in my head because I'll be wrong and then it'll be embarrassing. A good portion of rice. That's what makes it the Cold IPA. That's a defining part of the style, which is supposed to dry it out. And we did end up at 1010 with the final gravity, and the original gravity was 1067, bringing us to 7.5%. So there's a good bit behind this pretty light-looking beer. But let's give it a smell and see how it tastes. It's definitely mostly stone fruit. It's really good. It's like, it smells juicy, which I think as a person who's watching this video that probably likes beer, like, you know what I mean. It smells a little green grapey, I think. Ellie says that's reaching, but maybe I'm making things up. Maybe it's in my head because there's Nelson Sauvin, like Cabernet Sauvignon, which might be a white wine? No? Is that red wine? Yikes. I don't know wine at all. It smells good. It smells like what you think of, or like the Strata is great. I'm not getting a ton of cascadey, like, appley piney things, but it's a nice round, like, this is what hoppy beer smells like beer. So I get grape juiciness. Am I crazy? It's interesting. I can tell there's a lot of flaked rice in there. Maybe I wasn't supposed to do flaked rice. I think you're supposed to do flaked rice. It's good. It's good. The bitterness is right. The IBUs is right. It balances well. For 7.5%, there's some bitterness for sure, but it works well. It's interesting. I think maybe I'm just being a little judgy. I think I'd prefer a regular IPA with these things. Like, maybe fermented a little cooler so it doesn't get a ton of citrusness. Or even just a regular IPL. Like, these same hops, same recipe, except for less flaked rice. But I don't know. It's good. It is good. There's just a little something, and it's not actual sweetness because it's the final gravity is 1010. There's not a ton of residual sugar, but maybe it's like, I don't know, like a sweet rice. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. It's interesting. It's probably worth trying. It's good. Like, I'm liking it more and more as I sip on it. It's unique. I don't hate that people are calling it its own style. Cold IPA, dumb. Its own style, maybe not so dumb. I'm excited that I have a beer with Strata and Nelson and Cascade, and it's got some IBUs. I'm excited to have a hoppy beer. So we did this alongside the American Light Lager. I am someone who likes new age hops in a bitterer IPA. So I like having Strata. It's been a while. I had a single hop Strata IPA. That was really good. This is very good too. I'm very excited to have a hoppy beer on tap alongside my American Light Lager. So if I have one of these and I still want another beer, I can have the light lager. Or if I'm having some American Light Lager during the day, maybe I can have one of these a little later. I like hoppy beers. I like hoppy aromas. This is good. So if I were to brew something like this again, I do not think I would add so much flaked rice. And I may skip the flaked rice completely. I know that's part of the style, but I feel like maybe the IPL or the hoppy lager is a little skipped over. I know a lot of people are brewing hoppy lagers and hoppy pilsners and dry hop pilsners and everything, but I don't think we need to go so far as to the cold IPA. If you brew a lager beer and you brew it right and you bring down the final gravity so that it's nice and dry and crisp, I don't think that you need to lighten up the body that much with the flaked rice. I think that I would rather have a 7.5% IPL without the flaked rice in it. I think if I were to brew this again, I would probably make a starter for my yeast, but I would also ditch the rice or lower it a lot. I think 25 to 30% is too high in my opinion. It's impacting the beer in a way that makes it a little bit maybe too unique. I might want to do a response video to this video where I brew a hoppy lager that's very similar, but I cut down the rice to nil. I dial it back a tiny bit to 0. I don't think it's necessary. I think flaked rice is a waste of time. It gets us a paler body, but it leaves us no malt backbone to counteract this otherwise well-balanced beer. I think we can do better with a hoppy lager. If you want to see that video, let me know in the comments. If you think that's stupid and I'm boring, you probably didn't make it this far in the video, so we don't have to address you. For now, thanks for watching. Prost.